Our story begins in the past, where the bride and groom, Francis, and his wife, Eris, look very happy on their wedding day. They are posing for photos, and behind them stands Francis's brother, Diego, but there's no joy on his face. Many years later, the story returns to the same family. Now Francis and Eris have two sons, the eldest, Josh, and the youngest, Lucas. But life isn't the same anymore. Everyone is traveling in a dilapidated car filled with fear and anxiety. Zombies have spread across the country. Danger is everywhere, and now no place is safe or habitable. After a while, they all arrive at Francis's father's farmhouse, a long way from town. Upon arriving, Francis goes inside first to check if there are any zombies in the house. He enters cautiously, scanning every corner. Once inside, he finds his father dead. There was a bullet mark in his head. This meant he had shot himself to kill himself before becoming a zombie. The gun was lying nearby. Francis picked it up and kept it with him. Then he took off his father's watch, wiped the blood off it, and put it on himself. He then went to the kitchen where he found his mother. At first, he thought she was alive, but then he saw that she had completely become a zombie. Her body had been torn in two. Still, she crawled on the ground and started moving towards Francis. Tears welled up in Francis's eyes. Deeply saddened, he began to apologize to his mother. Francis apologized to her and then compelled to shoot her. He picked up the bodies of both his mother and father and buried them in the field behind the house. He did this in front of his family so that everyone would know the truth. After securing the house, everyone came inside. The next morning, Francis woke up early and went to the water well. He drank water himself to make sure it was clean and drinkable. When he was sure the water was safe, he called his children and gave them water. But it became clear that his wife Eris wasn't talking to him. There was a silence and distance between them, as if there was some quarrel or disagreement going on. Their eldest son, Josh, brought some bags of clothes from the car and asked if they wanted to bring them inside. Eris said, "Yes, bring them, but leave the bag containing the first aid kit in the kitchen. It might be useful later." Francis and his younger son, Lucas, were looking out the window. They saw a farm hut in the distance. Josh, the eldest son, suggested that they might find something there that could be useful. When Francis prepared to go outside, Lucas became frightened and held him tightly. He didn't want his father to go out because the hut was outside the four walls of the house. Francis lovingly reassured him, "Don't worry, I'll be back when I'm all right." Then he set off with Josh toward the hut. On the way, Josh noticed his father was wearing his grandfather's watch. He asked, "Dad, where did you get this watch?" But Francis didn't answer and continued walking silently. When they both reached the hut, it was dark and quiet. They tried to find anything useful, but then they saw a dead body hanging from the ceiling as if it had hanged itself. Francis didn't react to the horrific scene, as if it were a normal occurrence for him. He told his son, "Take out the keys from your pocket." Josh was terrified, his hands trembling. He slowly approached the body and tried to retrieve the keys. Just then, the hanging body fell, right on Josh. The child screamed in fear and ran out crying. He was in shock, unable to believe what had just happened. After returning home, Iris realized that Francis was being very strict with their eldest son, Josh, while he was gentle and loving with the younger son, Lucas. Francis suspected that Iris had deceived him and that Josh was not his real son. After a while, Iris told Francis to go down to the basement and fix the generator, as the house still had no electricity. When Francis reached the basement, he suddenly felt a strange state. His whole body began to tremble, and his breathing became rapid. Then he began to remember his childhood, when his father would beat and torture him in this very basement. That old pain resurfaced. When Iris saw him in this state, she immediately went to him, brought him upstairs, and took care of him. The generator needed fuel to run anyway, so it wasn't possible to start it at night. After a while, everyone sat down for dinner. The atmosphere was heavy. Iris said to Francis, "How long will we stay here? There's no food, no water, no electricity, and no security in this place." Francis calmly replied, "This is the safest place for us. This is my grandparents' house. We can till the fields, grow our crops, and live from here. This place is far away from zombies." Josh said that there's a camp in the north where people are still alive and living together. Hearing this, Francis angrily said, "We don't care about anyone's camp. Whoever wants to go, let them go, but don't get involved in the conversations of these adults." His voice was stern, and Josh fell silent. After dinner, Josh quietly left the house. He climbed onto the roof of his car and started looking at old photos he'd taken with his girlfriend. After a while, his phone fell from his hand. The battery was dead, so he couldn't charge it. Inside the house, Francis was looking at his son from the window. There was a strange sadness in his eyes, as if he was regretting something, but he didn't want to show it. After a while, his wife, Eris, came from behind and said angrily, "Why are you so strict with Josh? He's your child too. Treat him the same way you treat Lucas." Francis said nothing. He remained silent. The next morning, Francis was sitting outside the house. When Iris came to him and started talking about going north again, she explained that they might find food, water, and the safety of people there. She and the children wouldn't survive long there. After a long discussion, Francis finally agreed. They packed their things and got into the car. The atmosphere on the way was a little lighter. Everyone hoped that a new beginning might be possible in the north. On the way, George said, "Dad, Uncle Diego also told me that there's a camp in the north where people are safe." Hearing this, little Lucas listened attentively. As soon as Francis heard Diego's name from his son's mouth, his face hardened. His mind went into a spin. He thought to himself, "Now my wife knows where Diego is. When did she last talk to him? Was she lying to me?" His eyes filled with anger. Iris realized that Francis wasn't the same anymore. His face was cold and his gaze terrified. She tried to calm him down, but he kept driving. He didn't seem to listen to anyone. He pressed the accelerator harder. After a while, their children started screaming in fear. Francis stopped the car. When he looked ahead, he saw that he had reached a bridge where several cars were parked. The road was broken and blocked. Part of the bridge had collapsed. Iris got down and started loosening the gate chains to clear the way. But as soon as she opened the fence, a zombie that had been sleeping there suddenly got up and pounced on her. Francis saw this and, without thinking, jumped out of the car and ran towards it. Francis immediately picked up his gun and fired at the zombie, saving Iris. However, the sound of the gunshot attracted many nearby zombies. Within moments, everyone gathered around the car where the children were sitting. Both children started screaming and trembling with fear. Seeing the situation, Francis raised his gun and fired a shot into the sky, attracting all the zombies towards him and driving them away. His trick worked. All the zombies turned in his direction. Meanwhile, Aras quickly pulled the children out of the car and started running with them. Meanwhile, Francis saw a dead soldier lying nearby holding a grenade. He picked it up, and when all the zombies got close to him, he pulled the pin and threw it into their midst. Francis somehow survived and ran after his family. After some time, they all returned home. Francis said angrily, "Now the decision will be mine. What to do and what not to do. I will protect my family in my own way." 2 weeks passed after that day. Then one morning, Francis went alone back to the bridge where their car had been abandoned. He intended to retrieve it, but no matter how hard he tried, the car wouldn't start. The engine had completely failed. At home, Iris was taking care of the children. The 2 children were playing outside, and everything was quiet. Suddenly, she heard the big door of the farmhouse open. She hurried outside and saw that Francis had returned. He had a wheelbarrow filled with fuel cans and other items he had collected from broken vehicles he had found along the way. Iris asked him, "Where's the car?" Francis lied without hesitation. "It broke down." In reality, the car just needed fuel to get it running again. But Francis deliberately kept anyone from telling anyone. He told me that evening he went down to the basement alone. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of that place, as if he had conquered his childhood fear. He took fuel and put it in the generator and started it. In no time, the lights in the house came on. Now the lights, heater, and music system were all working. He played his wife's favorite songs, and they all started dancing together. It had been years since Iris had seen her family so happy and cheerful. She couldn't help herself. She laughed, she danced, and in that moment, all her fears vanished. Everyone had separate rooms at night. Francis was sitting in his room. He played the wedding video, the same old video in which she and Iris were smiling on their wedding day. Then Iris slowly approached him and tried to persuade him as if she were going to be there again. "You want to make everything right with me?" That night, Lucas got scared and came out of his room to Josh. He said, "I'm scared. I don't want to sleep alone." Josh smiled and said, "Okay, come sleep with me." A few days passed like this. Everything was going well. The house was peaceful. The children were playing, and Francis looked happy. He began to feel that life was on the mend. He told his family, "Everything will be better now. Just keep listening to me." The next morning, he said, "I'll bring the eggs right away because they had some chickens in the backyard." Francis went into the hut, but he didn't know the dog was sleeping inside. As soon as he went in, the dog suddenly pounced on him and bit his hand badly. Francis screamed in pain and somehow managed to free himself and returned home. Iris immediately cleaned his wound and bandaged it. Just then, they heard Josh shouting loudly outside, "Mom, Dad, come quickly." They both ran outside and saw Josh standing at the door holding a radio in his hand. He excitedly said, "Dad, the signal is back. I heard the news. They said we're close to camp. We just need a battery stone to make the radio work again." Francis replied in a calm but cool voice, "We don't have those batteries. That means the radio can't work anymore." But that was a lie. In reality, Francis began to like this lonely and quiet life. He didn't want his family to get their hopes up again because of the camp and insist on going there. At night, everyone was sitting at the dinner table. A quiet atmosphere reigned. Eris whispered, "Francis, you must go and get the car back." Francis lied again, The car is now completely broken down. It won't run. After saying this, he began to scare everyone. He said there's no safe place left outside. Rhodes is full of zombies. There's no such thing as a camp. It's all a lie. If we leave, we'll all die. It was clear on his face that he was now using both fear and lies to stop his family. Francis said sternly, "If you love life, don't try to leave this house. There are zombies everywhere outside. Whoever went out hasn't come back alive." The next morning, Josh came to his father again. He said, "Dad, give me the radio battery stone. I just want to listen to music." Francis replied coldly, "I told you, I don't have it." But he knew Josh was lying. He didn't want music, he wanted to listen to camp news. Josh said wearily, "Dad, I'm bored of this confined space. Give me something to do." Francis smiled and said, "Okay, if you want to do something, come with me." He took Josh to the farmland behind the farmhouse. There he stuck a long wooden stick into the ground, placed a glass bottle on top of it, and then handed Josh a pistol. Francis said in a serious voice, "Now it's time you learned how to use a gun so you can defend yourself if you ever need to." While Francis was teaching his son Josh how to shoot, he suddenly remembered his childhood, when his father taught him to hunt. He too would yell, scare, and kill at the slightest mistake. That same sternness had now come alive within Francis. He was yelling at Josh, "Aim, hurry up." Josh trembled with fear, barely able to breathe. Then the gun accidentally went off. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the field. Francis was still furious. Josh's eyes were filled with fear, tears welling up. Hearing the gunshot, Eris and little Lucas came running. They saw Francis yelling at his son and Josh completely terrified. But then something unexpected happened. The gunshot had drawn the zombies gathered around the nearby church. They were now heading in the direction where Francis and his family were. Their terrifying cries were heard from a distance. As soon as they saw the horde approaching, they dropped everything and ran inside the house. The door was locked, but now the house, which had once seemed the safest place, had become a terrifying cage, trapped amidst the sounds coming from outside. There was no longer any security outside the house. Hundreds of zombies had chased them all the way to the house. They were banging on the doors, trying to break the windows, and had surrounded the entire farmhouse. Inside, the family trembled with fear all night. The children hid in their mother's lap, and Francis stood by the door with a gun, hoping that something would change by morning. Then suddenly, a loud car horn sounded from outside. All the zombies stopped abruptly, and then began running in the direction of the sound. In a few minutes, the area around the house was empty. Francis and his family breathed a sigh of relief. The next morning, Francis cautiously opened the door. He looked around, everything was quiet. There were no zombies in sight. Then he slowly walked outside. But the sight outside was horrifying. All his chickens were dead. Blood and feathers were scattered everywhere. Despair was evident on Francis's face. He walked a little further. He walked towards the lake, where he saw a car parked. Francis saw Diego sitting near the car, and his face hardened with anger. As Diego got up and moved towards him, Francis immediately gripped his gun tightly. Diego said in a calm voice, "I've lost everything, Francis. Now you're all alone. You won't be able to save your family alone. That's why I've come to help you." But old wounds began to flare up in Francis's heart. He still hadn't forgotten the time he'd discovered Diego's affair with his wife Eris. That had made him suspect that Josh wasn't his real son. Francis said with a cold, hateful look, "You don't deserve to even ask me for help. You destroyed my home, you broke my trust. Now get out of my sight." Diego said softly, "Brother, please forgive me just this once. I made a mistake, but now I really want to help." Francis's anger was uncontrollable. He picked up his gun and pointed it at Diego. "I'm telling you one last time, get out or I'll shoot you." Diego stood silently for a few moments. Then, taking a deep breath, said, "Okay, Francis, whatever you want." Before leaving, Diego threw a map to Francis and said, "There's a camp to the north. If you love your family, go there. People are still alive there." With that, Diego got in the car and drove off without looking back. Francis bent down and picked up the map. At first, he considered burning it right there, but then paused. He thought for a moment and said softly, "Maybe it'll be useful someday." Returning home, he began to repair the broken windows and doors with wood, especially the windows that the zombies had broken the night before. Meanwhile, Lucas was wandering around the house. He saw a zombie wandering through the fields outside. Terrified, he ran to his father and asked, "Dad, is anyone outside?" Francis ran out without a word and followed the zombie into the field. He watched it for a while, then approached it with calm steps. Instead of shooting, he picked up his axe and severed its head in one stroke. Then he picked up the head and brought it to the door. His children were astonished. There was both fear and shock in their eyes. Francis threw the head to the ground and said in a cold voice, "Look, this is proof that I can protect you. I will kill anyone who threatens us." Just like that. That very day, Josh saw the map peeking out of his father's pocket. He immediately realized that the map Diego had given him was the camp map. He decided to steal it and take everyone there. That evening, while Francis was taking a shower, Josh sneaked into his room. He tried to get the map out of his clothes. But then Francis came out. George, frightened, ran away without the map. That night was the last day of the year. New Year's Eve. Francis tried to recreate the old atmosphere. He decorated a Christmas tree in front of the house, lit candles, and invited everyone to the dinner table. He acted as if nothing had happened. During dinner, Francis smiled and asked, "Come on, tell me, what's your wish this year?" Little Lucas said innocently, "I want a 22. Then he looked at Josh. Josh, with an angry expression, said, "I want that map in your pocket." Silence fell over the table. Aras tried to calm the situation, but now she was fed up too. She looked at Francis and said, "I want to know the truth, Francis. What's going on inside you these days? You're not the same as before. You've changed so much. You've become so tough." Francis took a deep breath, then in a cool tone said, "I wish we have another child. Maybe he'll bring us good luck." Hearing this, Aris became even more enraged. "You're joking. You can think like this even in this situation." Francis ignored her words as if he couldn't hear anything. Aris started shouting. Her anger exploded. Then Francis suddenly stood up and said, "Do you know what your mother wanted? She wanted to leave you and me." But Francis didn't stop there. He went further, and the truth is, your mother betrayed me. She was planning to run away with another man. Hearing this, Josh's face turned angry. He slammed his hand on the table and said loudly, "Stop it, Dad. Enough is enough." Francis glared at him, but Josh didn't back down. The fear that had gripped the house at that moment had broken through, turning into anger and pain. Fueled by his rage and jealousy, Francis took out the map and set it on fire in front of everyone. Many days passed after that night, but Francis still kept everyone locked in the house. Food had run out, and everyone was now surviving on sugarcane scraps. Iris tried to lighten the mood. She began spending time with her son and reading books to distract him. One night, Francis returned home and put heavy chains on the door. He claimed it was to protect them from zombies, but his son understood that he wasn't protecting them from the zombies outside, but from the zombies inside. He wants to keep him imprisoned inside. The boy angrily tried to stop Francis, but Francis raised his hand on him for the first time, a powerful slap that stunned the entire house. A moment later, a voice came from outside. Someone was calling for help from the other side of the door. The man panting said that his entire team had been killed by zombies. Iris thought it might be Diego. Her heart started pounding. Despite Francis's refusal, she forced the door open. But the man who came inside was indeed a soldier. Not Diego, he was badly injured. IDs brought him in and cleaned his wounds, even though Francis was not at all happy about this. That night, Josh secretly came to Iris. Tears were flowing from his eyes. He said, "I don't want to live with Francis anymore. I know he's not my real father. My real father is Uncle Diego." Iris broke down. She hugged him tightly and cried, "I'm sorry, son, but I can't leave him with you because I can't leave Lucas alone." The next morning, the soldier had fully regained consciousness. He was sitting in the kitchen, having breakfast with Lucas, while Francis watched them silently from a distance. Suspicion and anger were now clearly visible in his eyes. But Francis saw the door open and Josh had fled. This enraged Francis. His anger was no longer contained, and when he found no one to vent his frustration on, he turned to the poor soldier. He picked up a hammer, walked up to him, and without a word, struck him directly on the head. In an instant, he took the soldier's life. When Iris saw all this, her face went pale with fear. She tried to run away, but Francis caught her and slapped her hard. Iris fell to the ground, completely unconscious. When she regained consciousness, she found herself in the basement, where she and her son Lucas were locked. Francis had now completely lost his mind. He did something no one had imagined. He went upstairs and killed their dog. Then he cooked its meat and brought it downstairs, setting it in front of Iris and Lucas. As soon as Iris smelled the meat, she understood everything. She broke down, she picked up a piece and angrily threw it in Francis's face. After that, she tried to calm the situation a little. Perhaps she could find a way to convince Francis to come out. But now there was no hope. Francis was completely out of control. He came downstairs, leaving them locked in the basement. Iris tried everything to get out. She looked at the window Francis had blocked with wooden planks. She tried with all her strength, but couldn't open it. She fell backwards and injured her arm. The night had deepened. Suddenly, Francis heard Lucas crying from upstairs. He was screaming in pain as if someone had hurt him. Francis came downstairs in fear, opened the door and went inside to see what was happening. But at that very moment, Iris came from behind and stabbed Francis in the back with a sharp piece of wood. Francis screamed in pain and fell to the ground. Iris immediately picked Lucas up, closed the door and ran outside. But as soon as she left the house, Francis began to hear the same old voices again, those terrifying visions in which his father's spirit called out to him. He started screaming like crazy. As soon as Iris reached the exit, someone stood before her. It was Diego. But he was no longer human. His eyes were red, his face had decayed, he had become a zombie. Diego roared and ran towards him. Terrified, Iris ran back into the house, but before she could close the door, he burst in. The anger and hatred that had been suppressed within Francis for years exploded. He jumped up, picked up a hammer, and attacked Diego. With each blow, he was unleashing all his hatred, all his jealousy, and the pain of betrayal. He kept hitting until Diego stopped moving. The room fell silent again. Francis, the infection is spreading very quickly. We'll have to amputate Lucas's arm, Iris said tremblingly. Francis stepped back. He was terrified. He couldn't bear to see his own son in this state. His hands were shaking. Tears welled up in his eyes. Iris took a deep breath. She had now composed herself. She was a nurse. She knew what to do. She took a large knife, heated it over a fire to clean it. Then she held Lucas tightly and cut the area where Diego had bitten him. Lucas's scream echoed throughout the house. Francis bowed his head, knowing that his own stubbornness and madness had caused this. Francis stood in the corner of the room, unable to do anything. He simply watched as Iris did everything she could to save her son. As soon as she was finished, Iris, her voice trembling, I said, "Quickly, Francis, get the car, we have to take him to the hospital." Francis ran out without a word. The night was dark, the air was cold and quiet. He ran at full speed until he reached the bridge where their car was parked. But as he arrived, he saw someone standing in front of him. It was Josh, whom everyone had thought had fled. Josh was terrified, his face filled with terror. Josh thought he too had become a zombie. In fear and panic, Josh picked up his gun and fired. A bullet hit Francis squarely in the chest. He collapsed, gasping for breath. Josh ran to him. Tears welled in his eyes. He said, "Dad, I thought it wasn't you." Francis held his hand with a trembling hand. In a weak voice, he said, "You're my son, Josh. Go save your mother and Lucas." His words died there. Francis's eyes slowly closed, and with them, all hope in that house began to fade. Josh then drove back home to save everyone. Upon arriving, he saw Iris singing a song to her son Lucas. He thought Francis might have returned, and that's where our film ends. I hope you enjoyed this story. See you in the next video.